My name is Megan Harrison, and I am 45. Last month I quietly sold my organic farm for a massive $12.8 million. To test my family, my husband urged me to call my parents and older sister and confess I was totally bankrupt. Their cruel betrayal within hours proved the ugly truth he had warned me about for 16 years. What I did next at their grand anniversary dinner in front of everyone is why they are dead to me forever. Before I begin, if this story resonates with you, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you truly connect with it. Drop your location and local time in the comments. I love knowing where you all are. Let me take you back to a chilly Thursday morning in October. It was the day I signed the papers that permanently changed my life. The attorney's office smelled like stale coffee, nervous sweat, and sharp printer ink. I sat across from David Winchester, a massive stack of legal documents fanned out between us. I picked up the heavy black pen. I signed my name 16 times, 16 signatures to erase 22 years of my life. Each stroke of the pen transferred another massive piece of my soul. My 950 acres of rich, certified organic soil, my hard-won contracts with 4 major regional grocery chains, my pristine packing facility, my very name. All of it went to Summit Agribusiness. They had been using a fake shell company called Valley Holdings for months to quietly buy up local land without driving up prices. But today the real giant's name was on the ink. Matthew, my husband, sat closely beside me. His warm hand found mine under the heavy oak table right after the last signature. He squeezed my fingers once. He didn't say a single word. He didn't need to. The number on the final page screamed in the quiet room. $12.8 million. 22 long years ago, this valuable land was nothing but a weed-choked, dead strip of hard clay. My father had handed it to me like a cheap consolation prize. My older sister Jessica got the golden parcel, 75 beautiful acres right near the highway with perfect county water access. She sold it within a single year for $210,000. What did she do with it? She blew the cash on a luxury Asian vacation and a down payment on a massive house she could never afford. I got the useless dirt that nobody else wanted. They thought I would fail. They expected me to quit. But I taught myself complex soil chemistry by reading old library books by flashlight. I begged a farm credit union for a $45,000 loan at a terrible 8% interest rate. I spent my first 4 freezing winters sleeping in a tiny metal trailer with zero heat. Every single dollar I made went straight back into the frozen ground. Nobody helped me. Nobody came to check on me. Not my mother, not my father, not Jessica. But they showed up later. Oh, they always showed up later. The exact moment the farm started turning a real profit. David slid the final, binding document across the polished desk. I signed it. He shook my trembling hand. "Congratulations, Mrs. Harrison," he said softly. "You built something truly remarkable." Then his face grew serious, and he lowered his voice to a whisper. "Be very careful who you tell about this." Matthew nodded slowly, looking like he had been waiting for years to hear those exact words. On the quiet drive home, Matthew reached over and turned off the radio. He looked deeply into my eyes. "Before you call anyone," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I need you to hear me out." We sat at our worn kitchen table later that night. The house was completely silent except for the dripping faucet. Matthew placed a yellow legal pad between us. Written on the top line was a staggering number I had never seen him write before: $412,000. "That's exactly how much you have given your family in the last 16 years, he stated flatly. "Cash handed over, paid bills, temporary loans they never bothered to return. I've tracked every single penny." I stared at the huge number, my stomach twisting into tight knots. "Matthew," I started. "Last year my mother called me crying her eyes out. She desperately needed $18,000 for a new roof." He flipped a page, his jaw tight. 3 weeks after that check cleared, I saw their luxury cruise photos posted on Facebook. The Bahamas. I opened my mouth to defend her, but no words came out. He kept going, relentless. $9,500 for your niece Brittany's fall college tuition. Jessica posted a picture of a brand new designer handbag on Instagram that exact same week. The price tag was almost identical to the tuition. She claimed it was a sweet gift from her husband, Tyler. He paused, letting the bitter truth hang in the air. "And when you crushed your shoulder in that awful tractor accident, nobody came. Not one single person from your family visited the hospital. Instead, your mother called the very next week to ask for a cash deposit on a brand new car." The kitchen felt suffocatingly quiet. Have I been blind this whole time? If you tell them about the 12.8 million, Matthew said, his voice breaking slightly. They will be wonderful to you. They will call you every single day. They will bring you beautiful flowers, and you will never ever know if any of it is real. I pushed my chair back aggressively from the table. They're my parents, Matthew. I know, he replied softly. That is exactly why this matters. He put his pen down. Tell them you went completely bankrupt. Tell them a massive undetected root blight wiped out the entire late-season crop overnight. The furious buyers pulled their contracts, and the bank immediately foreclosed on the property. Tell them the bank took everything you own. Then, we wait. He looked at me with sad, tired eyes. And if they prove you wrong, Megan, then I will beg for their forgiveness. I will drive you to their house myself and apologize. I looked back down at the yellow legal pad. 16 years of endless line items, endless giving. Not once in that massive list did anyone ever ask me how I was actually doing. If I'm wrong, I whispered, my voice shaking, I will apologize. I want so badly to be wrong. He reached across the wooden table and gently held my cold hand. I know you do. But deep down, in the darkest corner of my heart, a terrifying thought began to take root. What if he was right? The next morning, pale sunlight crept through the bedroom blinds, but I felt entirely frozen. I sat on the edge of the mattress, clutching my phone. I scrolled back through months of digital history, desperately hunting for my father's number. I realized with a sickening jolt that I hadn't dialed him directly in nearly a year. It was always my mother who reached out, always when she needed a favor. That's when I saw it. Buried deep in the archives. A family group chat I was quietly, deliberately removed from 9 months ago. I never even knew this secret digital room existed. My thumb hovered over the screen. I tapped it. There was a chilling thread between my older sister and my mother. Jessica, just cry on the phone. She always sends it every time. Mom, I know. Next week I'll tell her the roof is leaking again. I read the glowing text twice, then a third time. My lungs forgot how to pull in air. This wasn't a moment of weakness. This wasn't a desperate parent having a terrible day and turning to her daughter for support. This was a coordinated, practiced scheme, a literal system they built together specifically designed around the painful fact that I could not say no when my mother shed tears. I dragged my finger down the glass. There were dozens more messages, a barrage of rapid-fire calculations. Jessica asking which sad story to use next. My mother suggesting the perfect timing. Wait until after she finishes the autumn harvest. She'll have fresh cash. My mother actually coaching her oldest child on how to phrase the ask for Brittany's college tuition so it sounded like an absolute emergency. 16 years, $412,000. And my own flesh and blood had a playbook to extract it. My hands trembled violently. I set the device face down on the textured bedspread and pressed my palms hard against my thighs until the shaking finally stopped. Miraculously, I didn't cry. Something deep inside my chest had fundamentally shifted. It wasn't broken, it was rearranged. It felt exactly like a fractured bone that had been healing wrong for decades and just violently snapped back into its proper place. The pain was blinding, but the alignment was finally right. I picked up the screen and walked downstairs. Matthew stood at the kitchen counter, pouring dark roast coffee into a mug. He took one look at my pale face and gently set the glass pot down. I'm calling right now, I told him. My voice didn't sound like my own. He nodded slowly. He didn't ask what changed my mind. He could clearly see the ghost in my eyes. I dialed my mother first. She answered on the second ring. Megan, darling, I was just thinking about you. Her tone dripped with honey, warm and inviting. It was the exact tone she always used right before asking for a handout. Mom, I need to tell you something. I swallowed hard. My throat felt coated in sandpaper. The farm, the bank foreclosed. I forced the lie through my teeth, making it sound as devastating as possible. A terrible root blight completely ruined the soil. The corporate buyers sued us for breach of contract. I owe so much more than the land was ever worth. I had to sell absolutely everything just to cover the massive debt. Silence. It wasn't the shocked, breathless silence of a parent absorbing catastrophic news about their child's ruined life. No. It was the cold, calculating silence of a machine recalculating a route. What do you mean? She asked finally. Her voice was entirely flat. What about the funds I ask you for next month? I closed my burning eyes. I don't have any money, Mom. None. She exhaled. It was a long, highly irritated breath. The exact same sharp sigh she used to make when I accidentally spilled milk as a clumsy little girl. Let me talk to your father. I'll call you back. She didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't ask where Matthew and I would live, or how we would buy groceries, or if my heart was broken. She simply hung up. The line went dead. The very first thing my mother thought about when her youngest daughter lost her entire world was her own missed payment. My stomach roiled as I dialed Jessica. You're joking, my sister snapped the second the fake news left my lips. Brittany's tuition is due in 3 weeks. I'm so sorry, Jess, I really lost everything. You always do this, Jessica shrieked, her anger slicing through the speaker. You always find a selfish way to make everything about you. A sharp click, the line cut out. She hung up on me. I carefully set the phone down on the wooden table. Matthew sat directly across from me, both of his large hands planted flat on the surface, watching intently. His jaw clenched so tight a muscle ticked near his ear. His eyes locked on my silent phone like he wanted to smash it into a million pieces with a heavy steel hammer. Nobody asked if I'm okay, I whispered into the quiet room. He didn't respond. He didn't need to. The devastating answer sat right between us, heavy and permanent as a granite tombstone. Then, the black screen of my phone suddenly lit up and violently buzzed, bringing a new notification from the very family group chat I was supposedly removed from. The black screen of my phone lit up, emitting a bright, cheerful chime that echoed in the deadly quiet kitchen. It was the main family group chat, the exact one Matthew had gently urged me not to leave weeks ago. Don't run from it, he had whispered back then. Stay. See the truth with your own eyes. I swiped the glass. My stomach dropped into a bottomless pit. The brutal messages came incredibly fast, one after another, forming a rapid-fire execution of my entire character. My mother typed first, her words sharp as broken glass. Megan lost absolutely everything. Bankrupt. I always said letting her run that dirt farm alone was a massive mistake. 3 minutes later, Jessica chimed in with venom. I knew that place would fail eventually. She should have gone to a real college like I did. Then came Tyler, my brother-in-law, a man who had personally asked me for cash exactly twice in the past year. Did he offer sympathy? No. So where does that leave Brittany's school tuition? I frantically searched for my father's name. It sat right at the very top of the chat, grayed out, showing he was active and reading, but he remained completely silent, not one single word in defense of his ruined daughter. Then my mother delivered the final, crushing blow in solid capital letters. Nobody lent her a dime. She did this to herself. I read every cruel syllable slowly. No second-hand accounts, no guessing, just their vicious words, stamped permanently with their names, typed just minutes after learning their blood relative had lost 22 years of back-breaking labor. Jessica sent a vicious follow-up. Honestly, she's been throwing money around for years, pretending to be something she's not. This was bound to happen. Throwing money around. My breath hitched in my throat. I thought about the $9,500 I wired for her daughter's education just 4 months ago. The heavy $18,000 check for my parents' leaking roof. The steady draining drip of my hard-earned cash that kept Jessica driving leased luxury SUVs and my mother enjoying constant kitchen renovations. My fingers moved automatically. I screenshotted everything. I wasn't plotting revenge. I just desperately needed solid proof that this nightmare was real. Proof that I didn't imagine the abuse. That the very people who raised me were, at this exact second, mocking my downfall and warning each other not to throw me a lifeline. Matthew walked quietly behind my chair and read the glowing screen over my trembling shoulder. He placed his large, warm hand squarely on my back. He said absolutely nothing. There was nothing left to say. An hour passed in heavy silence. Then a loud, urgent knock rattled our front door. It was Elias, our oldest farmhand. He was still wearing his heavy, mud-stained overalls. He slowly took off his faded cap, his rough hands shaking slightly, and reached deep into his chest pocket. He pulled out a thick, deeply worn manila envelope and pushed it forcefully into my hands. It's $4,000, Megan. It's my entire savings, he said, his gravelly voice thick with unshed tears. We can lease a used tractor. We'll plant the fields again, kiddo. I ain't leaving you. My God. I broke down, right there on the cold wooden porch. I sobbed until my ribs ached. A hired man whose sweat in my fields was fiercely willing to hand over his entire life savings, while the family I had bled for my entire life was busy calling me a pathetic failure behind a screen. The very next afternoon, my phone rang again. My mother. This time her voice was painfully careful and overly measured. It was the exact fake tone she used when delivering bad news she had already decided was somebody else's fault. "Sweetheart, about the big anniversary dinner next Friday. What about it?" I asked, gripping the edge of the granite counter. "Your father and I have been talking, and we think maybe it's best if you sit this one out." The air left the room. "You're uninviting me." "Don't put it like that," she sighed, sounding incredibly inconvenienced. "You're going through a really hard time. People will ask uncomfortable questions. I just don't want the mood of the party to be negatively affected." I let her incredibly selfish sentence settle into my bones. My mother was not worried about my mental state. She was terrified that my sudden failure would stain her perfect, shiny party. She dreaded that someone at the Oakwood Tavern would lean over their wine glass and whisper, "Didn't Megan lose her farm?" The grand illusion of the flawless Campbell family would finally crack in front of 50 important guests. "I understand," I said, keeping my voice terrifyingly flat. "It's only one silly dinner, Megan. We'll do something nice together after. Just family. Just family." The word sounded violently different now. Thinner. Completely hollowed out from the inside, like a rotten tree waiting to snap. Matthew stood in the kitchen doorway, leaning casually against the frame. He had heard every single word on speakerphone. He pulled a small, worn notebook from his shirt pocket and jotted something down in sharp ink. Date, time, exactly what was said. I hung up the call and set the device on the counter. For the very first time in my entire existence, I did not cry after a conversation with my mother. The hot tears simply weren't there anymore. In their place was something entirely new, a flat, chillingly still surface, like a deep lake frozen completely solid overnight. I looked straight at Matthew. "I'm going to that dinner," I stated. He studied my hardened face for a long, quiet moment. Then he gave a single, firm nod. "I know. I wasn't going to that restaurant to celebrate 45 years of marriage. I was going to watch an empire of lies burn to the ground. But I didn't know yet that the real attack wouldn't wait for Friday. It was going to walk right through my own front door in exactly 3 days. 3 agonizing days before the massive anniversary dinner. A silver SUV crunched loudly up my long gravel driveway. There was zero warning. No call, no hurried text message. Just the heavy slamming of an expensive car door. It was my sister. But Jessica wasn't alone. 2 entirely unfamiliar people stepped briskly out of her shiny vehicle. A tall, sharply dressed woman clutching a metal clipboard, and a severe-looking man holding a small black laser measuring device. I was standing at the stainless steel kitchen sink, my hands covered in warm soap suds, when I saw them marching straight across my dead grass. Jessica was sporting a pair of brand-new designer leather boots, the exact same outrageously priced boots she bought the very month she sobbed to me that she absolutely couldn't afford her daughter Brittany's tiny soccer cleats. She didn't bother to knock. She forcefully twisted the knob and walked through my side door as if she already owned the very floorboards beneath her feet. "Valerie, the main living room is right through here," Jessica announced loudly to the woman with the clipboard, completely and intentionally ignoring my presence. "We need to talk," I said, wiping my dripping hands on a faded dish towel. "Hello to you too, Jessica. Who exactly are these strange people in my house?" She didn't sit. She stood squarely in the center of my warm kitchen and aggressively folded her arms over her chest. "This is a professional appraiser and my personal real estate agent. Tyler and I are on a strict 48-hour deadline to secure an emergency bridge loan for our massive new house." I stared at her, utterly bewildered by the sheer audacity of the woman. "You say you're totally bankrupt," she continued, her voice dripping with venomous condescension. "Fine, whatever, but you still physically have this entire house. Sell it. Give me my rightful share right now." I slowly set the damp dish towel down on the cool counter. The air in the room felt thick and suffocating. "Your share?" I repeated, my voice dropping an entire octave. "Mom and Dad raised us both equally," she shouted, pointing a manicured finger at my face. "They put food on the table, clothes on our backs. You owe this family, Megan. You got the incredible 75 acres right by the main highway. You sold them for a fortune. I got the useless clay field nobody on earth wanted, and I worked my fingers to the bone to turn it into something from absolute scratch." She waved her hand dismissively, rolling her eyes to the ceiling. "That's completely different. You didn't even go to a real college. You didn't need nearly as much money to survive." Matthew stepped quietly into the kitchen from the dark hallway. His voice was dangerously low, but it was cold enough to freeze boiling water mid-air. "Jessica," he stated firmly, "my wife said no. Get these random people out of my private home right this second before I call the county sheriff. Please leave, I added, stepping closer to my imposing husband. Jessica spun violently on her expensive heels, glaring at Matthew. This is a private family matter. You don't get a single say in this. Megan is my family now, Matthew shot back, his eyes narrowing into dark slits. And she said no. The bright kitchen fell dead silent. The appraiser awkwardly lowered his glowing red laser pointer, looking deeply uncomfortable and intensely regretful of accepting this bizarre job. Jessica's jaw tightened so hard I thought her teeth might crack under the immense pressure. Then she pivoted sharply back to me, playing her absolute worst card. Mom and Dad firmly believe you're secretly hiding money somewhere. There it was, the ugly, undeniable truth hanging naked in the air. They hadn't driven all the way out here to ask for my help. They came specifically to accuse me of lying, and they cruelly brought total strangers to literally measure my personal home for a forced auction while I was standing terrified inside it. Jessica turned on her heel and stormed out without another single word. The flustered agent, Valerie, and the red-faced appraiser scrambled awkwardly out the door right behind her. The rusty screen door snapped violently shut, rattling the glass panes. I stood completely frozen in my kitchen, listening intensely to her powerful engine roar to life and back aggressively out of the dirt drive. I didn't move a single muscle until the harsh sound was completely swallowed by the wind. That exact same evening, my cell phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was my father. His voice sounded incredibly tired. Not deeply worried about his youngest daughter's ruined life, just worn down. Dealing with me felt exactly like another exhausting chore he desperately hadn't planned for. Megan, Jessica angrily says you won't help her. Dad, I whispered, gripping the plastic phone tighter. I clearly told you I lost absolutely everything. Your mother is very, very upset about this whole situation. I closed my burning eyes, fighting the desperate urge to scream into the receiver. Dad, I just lost my entire farm. I just told you I am completely bankrupt, and you're calling me right now because Jessica is slightly upset? A long, agonizing silence stretched across the line. I could hear his shallow breathing, frantically trying to find the one safe, neutral sentence that wouldn't disturb the careful, fragile peace he had spent his entire pathetic life blindly protecting. You know exactly how your mother gets, he offered finally, his tone dripping with weak resignation. I swallowed the lump of raw emotion lodged deep in my throat. Dad, I asked softly, when I severely broke my shoulder, did you come visit me? The phone line went terrifyingly quiet for a very long time. I'm just asking, I pressed, tears finally pricking the corners of my eyes. He hung up. No weak answer, no desperate defense, just the hollow, echoing click of a coward running away. The next bright, chilly morning, I forced myself to drive to Parker's grocery for basic supplies. Nora Fitzgerald, my mother's absolute closest friend from the local church, physically cornered me right in the middle of the cereal aisle. She dramatically tilted her head, that specific, pitying way people do when they've eagerly consumed terrible gossip about your life from someone else. Megan, honey, she cooed, placing a patronizing hand on my rigid arm. Your poor mother told me everything. I am so incredibly sorry. My knuckles turned stark white as I gripped the cold metal cart handle. She told you exactly what, Nora? Just that things have been tough with the farm? She's intensely worried about your poor choices. I stared blankly at the colorful cereal boxes. My mother was not intensely worried about me. She was actively distributing a highly manufactured sob story. By the exact time my tires hit my gravel driveway again, there were 3 more blinking messages from nosy neighbors on my answering machine. Every single one saying some version of the same sickening phrase, "Heard the awful news from your mom." She had systematically told the entire small town that I went completely bankrupt because of incredibly bad, selfish decisions, because I arrogantly refused to listen to my wiser family, because I was much too foolish and proud to ever beg them for help. She wasn't just abandoning me in my darkest hour, she was viciously making absolutely sure that everyone else in town abandoned me too. My cold hands tightened on the leather steering wheel until my fingers ached. This wasn't simple carelessness. This was a fully planned, ruthless smear campaign. But she forgot one crucial thing. In a town this small, not everyone buys the shiny story. And the one person who knew the truth was about to walk right up to my porch. The afternoon sun was sinking low, casting long, bruised purple shadows across the empty fields. When Linda Bowman's familiar blue sedan slowly crunched up the driveway. Linda was 78 years old, a sharply intelligent retired school teacher who had lived exactly 4 properties over since long before I was even born. She had personally taught half the kids in the entire town of Mapleton their basic multiplication tables. She still received thick stacks of heartfelt Christmas cards from grateful students who had graduated 35 long years ago. When Linda stood up to speak at the crowded town meetings, people actually stopped talking and listened. Not because she was loud or demanding, but because she possessed a quiet, unbreakable moral compass and was right more often than anyone else in the county. She found me sitting alone on the fading wooden porch, staring blankly at the crooked line of wooden fence posts that used to proudly mark the eastern edge of my sprawling property. My eyes were raw and rimmed with angry red. I didn't even try to pretend they weren't. I didn't wipe my face. "I brought a fresh cherry pie," she announced simply, her voice steady and warm. She didn't offer fake pity. She didn't ask how I was holding up. She carefully set the warm, foil-covered plate on the peeling railing and lowered herself into the empty rocking chair beside me. She didn't press me to speak, but the safe, sturdy silence she offered pulled the absolute truth right out of my chest. I told her absolutely everything. I told her about the massive, life-altering $12.8 million sale to Summit Agribusiness. I confessed Matthew's desperate, brilliant test to uncover my family's true nature. I detailed the chilling phone calls, the viciously cruel group chat messages calling me a pathetic failure, the brutal uninvitation to the huge anniversary dinner, and the toxic spreading rumors my own mother was actively planting at the local supermarket to ruin my reputation. I didn't hold a single detail back, and she didn't interrupt me once. She just rocked slowly, listening with the intense focus of a woman who had seen generations of this town's ugly secrets. When I finally finished, completely out of breath and emotionally raw, Linda remained perfectly quiet for a very long time. She looked out thoughtfully at the dying yard, at the massive red barn Matthew had painstakingly repainted last humid summer, at the crushed gravel drive where my sister Jessica's aggressive tire marks were still clearly visible in the dirt. "I've watched your mother quietly borrow from your hard work for 22 years, she finally said, her voice dropping to a low, gravelly whisper. "I've watched Jessica proudly drive a brand new luxury car every single year while you stubbornly patched your ancient tractor engine with cheap baling wire." She paused, turning her sharp, intelligent eyes directly to face me. "I've watched all of it, Megan. And I never said a single thing because it wasn't my rightful place to interfere in another family's messy business." Her eyes were completely steady, anchoring me to reality. "But nobody else can ever set your boundaries for you, sweetheart. That painful part is entirely yours to do." I shakily wiped my wet eyes with the back of my rough hand. A tiny ember of real strength finally flared in my hollow chest. "Are you going to their big anniversary dinner on Friday?" Linda slowly stood up, picking up her empty pie plate and casually brushing a tiny crumb off the ceramic edge. "I will absolutely be there," she stated firmly. "Table 4, right up front by the main stage." She gently patted my shaking shoulder on her way down the creaky porch steps. At the very bottom, she paused and turned back to look at me one last time. "Whatever you decide to do, Megan," she promised, her eyes burning with fierce loyalty, "I will be right there." And I believed her with my whole heart, because Linda Bowman was the absolute only person in this entire town who had never ever asked me for a single thing. Wednesday evening arrived, heavy and humid. The dreaded dinner was exactly 2 short days away. I was out back, quietly feeding the few squawking chickens, the only livestock I stubbornly kept when the massive corporate sale went through. The air smelled thick, like an impending rainstorm. My phone vibrated violently in my dirty pocket. I pulled it out. "Jessica." My thumb hovered over the glowing red decline button. I almost didn't answer, but something deep, dark, and undeniable in my gut fiercely told me to pick up the call. "Hey," I said, keeping my tone completely neutral. Her voice was shockingly soft, almost gentle. It was a bizarre, sugary version of my older sister I hadn't heard in years. "I've been thinking a lot about the other day." "Okay," I replied cautiously. "I was way out of line aggressively coming to your house like that. You're going through a really hard, devastating time, and I selfishly made it all about me." I waited in silence, clutching the rough wooden fence rail. I knew exactly what a real apology sounded like. This wasn't one. She was expertly rearranging soft words to sound like genuine remorse, but the core was hollow. "Listen," Jessica continued smoothly. "I talked to Mom for a long time. She totally agrees with me. You should definitely come to the big dinner on Friday night." I leaned heavily against the fence, frowning. "Mom specifically told me not to come. She said my presence would ruin the festive mood." I know. That was entirely wrong of her," Jessica cooed, her tone dripping with fake sincerity. "It's their 45th anniversary, Megan. Family is family, no matter what. You really should be there." Something about the exact way she said it, too impossibly smooth, far too perfectly rehearsed, made the tiny hairs on the back of my arms stand straight up. My instincts screamed that I was walking blindly into a trap. "But, you know," she added quickly, her voice dropping a fraction of an octave, "just please don't bring up the money stuff or the foreclosure. Mom and Dad are incredibly stressed out enough as it is." "I wasn't planning to," I answered truthfully. "Great, so you'll definitely come?" I stared out at the dark, gathering clouds on the horizon. "I'll be there." I hung up the phone and stood perfectly still in the quiet yard, watching the ignorant chickens happily peck at the scattered feed. The sharp smell of rain grew stronger. Something about this sudden invitation didn't sit right in my chest. It felt exactly like bait. Matthew was sitting patiently on the dark porch when I walked slowly back to the house. I told him every word of the bizarre call. He leaned far forward in his creaky chair, resting his elbows on his knees. "Jessica is never that kind without a very specific reason. Maybe she just genuinely feels bad," I offered weakly, wanting to believe it. He looked up at me, his eyes dark and knowing in the fading light. He didn't bother to argue. He didn't need to. We've been married through 16 hard years of this exact family dynamic. I knew exactly what that protective look meant. Why in the world would Jessica suddenly need her bankrupt, ruined little sister at that fancy dinner? The terrifying question followed me all the way to bed, pulled the covers over my shivering shoulders, and sat in the pitch-black dark beside me, chillingly unanswered. I was about to walk directly into the lion's den, completely unaware that the sharpest teeth belonged to the one man who was supposed to protect me. Friday morning dawned thick with heavy gray clouds. It was the absolute worst day of my life, disguised as a celebration. I sat alone at the kitchen table, staring blankly at my laptop screen. I was simply trying to find an old, forgotten digital receipt from a local supply company to close out a final accounting file. My eyes scanned mindlessly through hundreds of buried, unread messages about bulk seed orders and mundane equipment invoices. Then, a totally unexpected sender name caught my eye. A forwarded message from my father, sent directly to my mother exactly 7 months ago. I had blindly skimmed right past it during the chaotic spring planting season. It had no clear subject line, no urgent text in the preview, just a blank forward. My hand hovered over the plastic mouse. Why would Dad secretly forward an email to Mom without telling me? My chest tightened. I clicked it open. The glowing screen loaded a professional inquiry letter. It was from the corporate acquisitions team at Summit Agribusiness, officially addressed to the Mapleton County Assessor's Office. The massive company was quietly asking around about prime agricultural land in our specific area. They were hunting for something very exact: fully certified organic acreage, with pre-existing lucrative distribution contracts. A note was attached at the very top from a county clerk who played poker with my dad. "Daniel, thought you should quietly know about this. Looks like someone huge is highly interested in Megan's exact land." My breath hitched in my throat, but that wasn't the killing blow. There was a second, hidden email attached directly below it, sent straight from my own father's personal email address directly to the lead Summit agribusiness agent. My dad hadn't just passively received the hot tip, he had eagerly replied to it behind my back. He had secretly attached scanned, private copies of my hard-earned organic soil certifications. He had sent them my highly confidential supermarket contracts. And at the very bottom, typed in crisp black letters, was his arrogant demand: "If I can personally facilitate this massive sale behind the scenes, I will require a standard 5% broker's finder fee, approximately $640,000. My vision blurred. He tried to sell me out. My own father, the man who handed me a dead patch of dirt 22 years ago, actively tried to auction off my absolute life's work for a dirty commission. He instantly forwarded his greedy betrayal to my mother. She knew too. 7 long months ago, my parents knew a corporate giant was deeply interested in buying my farm for a price that would permanently alter the course of my life. And they said absolutely nothing. They actively plotted to skim over $500,000 right off the top of my sweat and tears. That's why they kept bleeding me dry. The horrifying realization hit me like a physical punch to the gut. They kept the ruthless playbook running, constantly begging for roof repairs and college tuition, because the exact moment I sold the land and had true wealth, I might finally realize my worth. I might permanently stop being their private, blind ATM. I sat in the suffocating silence for a very long time. My mug of coffee grew ice cold. A single trapped housefly buzzed and bumped mindlessly against the tight window screen, desperately trying to escape. I felt exactly like that fly. My shaking fingers hit the keyboard. I screenshotted the damning email chain. I saved it directly to my phone's photo gallery, locking it right next to the vicious group chat messages and the sickening 16-year list of every single dollar I had ever freely given them. Then, I stood up, my spine rigid as steel. I walked upstairs and calmly got dressed for battle. I didn't choose a fancy gown. I picked something simple, clean, and undeniable. A dark, tailored blouse and my very best scuffed leather riding boots. I was a proud farmer, not a fake socialite. Matthew stood quietly in front of the bedroom mirror, slipping on his structured navy sport coat. He looked at my fierce reflection in the glass. "Are you ready?" he asked gently. I quickly checked my black leather purse. The crisp, folded bank receipt proving the $12 $8 million sale to Summit Agribusiness was still safely tucked inside one of the zippered pockets. I hadn't originally planned on bringing it tonight, but I definitely wasn't taking it out now. "Let's go," I whispered. The tense drive to the Oakwood Tavern took exactly 15 agonizing minutes. Matthew kept both strong hands firmly on the steering wheel at 10 and 2. The car radio remained entirely off. Out the passenger window, the massive flat fields looked incredibly gray and lonely under the low October sky. Somewhere out there in the biting wind, the 950 beautiful acres I used to proudly call mine were already being aggressively surveyed by Summit's corporate team. "What exactly do you want to do when we walk in there?" Matthew asked softly, his eyes glued to the dark road. "Nothing," I answered truthfully, my voice chillingly calm. "I just want to physically be there. And if something ugly happens, then it happens. I am absolutely not going to start a screaming match, Matthew. But I am completely done pretending everything is beautifully fine when my soul is bleeding." He gave a sharp nod of deep understanding. We slowly passed the towering grain elevator on Highway 7 and turned sharply onto Elm Street. The Oakwood Tavern sat proudly on the bustling corner, a classic brick-front restaurant draped in warm, glowing fairy lights they never bothered to take down after the holidays. It boasted a large private dining room in the back that half the town had rented out at least once in their lives. My phone vibrated warmly against my leg. A quick text from Linda Bowman. "I'm inside, sweetheart. Table 4. Nora Fitzgerald is sitting right next to me. So is Brenda Jefferson. I will be right here." I typed back a single, solid red heart emoji. It was the absolute most emotion I could physically manage. Matthew pulled our car slowly into the packed gravel lot. Through the massive glowing front window of the restaurant, I could clearly see the elaborate private dining room. Crisp white tablecloths, towering, expensive floral arrangements, and my mother. She was gliding effortlessly between the crowded tables in her sparkling best dress, throwing her head back in fake laughter, resting her manicured hand gently on a neighbor's shoulder. She looked so incredibly happy. She looked exactly like a beloved woman joyously celebrating 45 years of flawless marriage, completely surrounded by a town that adored her. Near the front stage, Jessica was proudly standing by a small wooden riser holding a silver microphone. She was wearing a stunning, clearly brand new designer outfit. Tyler stood awkwardly beside her, nervously fidgeting with his tight shirt cuffs. I checked my heavy purse one final, desperate time. The secret corporate receipt, the loaded phone, the damning screenshots. Everything was armed and ready. Matthew slowly turned off the car engine. The sudden quiet was deafening. He turned his body toward me in the dark cabin. "Whatever happens in that room," he promised fiercely, "I am standing right beside you." I reached for the cold metal handle and pushed the heavy car door open. The freezing night air hit my face like a slap. I could hear the muffled, cheerful party music leaking through the thick brick walls. We started walking toward the glowing entrance. I was ready to face the music, but as my hand touched the restaurant door, I had absolutely no idea they had secretly prepared a devastating trap that was about to spring the exact second I walked inside. The private dining room at the Oakwood Tavern was stiflingly warm and packed shoulder to shoulder. 50 people filled the tight space, friendly neighbors, familiar faces from Grace Fellowship Church, and my father's retired gray-haired colleagues from the local grain cooperative. Women my mother had played cutthroat bridge with for 32 long years. Crisp white tablecloths, flickering candles in tall glass holders, and half-empty wine glasses cluttered every surface. A massive, professionally printed banner stretched proudly across the brick-back wall. 45 years. Daniel and Pamela. My mother spotted me first. Her wide, perfect smile completely froze on her painted face for exactly half a second, just long enough for my hyper-aware eyes to catch the genuine terror before she aggressively rearranged her features into something sickeningly welcoming. She leaned sharply toward Jessica and whispered urgently. Jessica whispered something right back. Even from across the crowded room, I could clearly read my sister's frantic lips. "I told you I explicitly invited her." My mother instantly crossed the wooden floor, her arms thrown dramatically wide open for an audience. "Megan, my darling, you actually came. How wonderful." She pulled me into a suffocating hug. It was a flawless performance for the town. Her rigid fingers felt exactly like stiff, cold iron bars pressing into my back. "Hi, Mom," I managed to say, my voice completely devoid of emotion. "You look nice, sweetheart. Just sit anywhere you'd like," she commanded softly, turning away faster than a striking snake. Matthew and I quietly found a small empty table pushed awkwardly near a drafty window. Linda Bowman was exactly 2 tables over, seated proudly right up front at table 4. She was flanked like a bodyguard by Nora Fitzgerald and Brenda Jefferson. Linda caught my eye through the thick crowd and gave one single solid nod. Small, steady, and unbreakable. "I'm here." The crowded room hummed loudly with cheerful conversation. I recognized almost every single face. These were the very people who had watched me grow up from a quiet, dirt-covered girl. People who eagerly bought fresh produce straight from my honest farm stand. People who cheerfully waved to me from their rusted pickup trucks on lonely county roads. And right now, every single one of them intimately knew I was a completely bankrupt failure because my own mother had meticulously told them so. I could physically feel the heavy, uncomfortable glances, the slight, pitying tilt of a neighbor's head, the hushed, whispered aside quickly hidden behind a raised wine glass. They were highly sympathetic, most of them, but it was the exact kind of cold sympathy that actively keeps its safe distance from a contagious disease. Nobody dared to sit at our lonely table except an elderly couple I barely recognized from the hardware store. Under the table, Matthew reached out and squeezed my trembling hand hard. "Steady," he murmured, his voice a low, grounding rumble. Up front, Jessica proudly stepped up to the silver microphone near the small wooden riser. She tapped it twice with her manicured fingernail. Tap, tap. The loud, buzzing room slowly began to quiet down, heads turning expectantly toward the stage. She caught Tyler's nervous eye across the room. He gave a weak nod. She flashed a blinding, terrifyingly confident smile. Something major was about to happen. I could physically feel the atmospheric pressure drop in the room. My mother gracefully took the microphone from Jessica and stepped proudly to the very center of the riser. She elegantly held a small, folded note card in one hand, though I was entirely certain she had the fake speech deeply memorized. She had been rehearsing for grand moments exactly like this her entire narcissistic life. "Thank you all so very much for being here with us tonight," she began, her voice ringing clear and emotional. 45 beautiful years, can you even believe it? A wave of warm laughter and polite applause rippled through the guests. My father stood stiffly beside the massive tiered cake table, his rough hands clasped tightly in front of him, his chin dipped low, his default cowardly posture for any public event where he was forced to be seen. "Daniel and I have been incredibly blessed with so very much," my mother continued, gesturing grandly around the decorated room. "A truly beautiful home, wonderful, loyal friends." She paused dramatically. "And 2 precious daughters." She turned directly toward Jessica first, her eyes shining with sickening pride. "Our Jessica, our brilliant firstborn, highly college-educated, a remarkably wonderful mother to our stunning granddaughter Brittany, who is already standing at the very top of her high school class. Daniel and I simply couldn't be any prouder of her." Jessica practically beamed, absorbing the spotlight like a dying plant drinking water. Tyler awkwardly put his arm around her waist, looking deeply uncomfortable. Then, my mother casually glanced in my direction. It was a beat entirely too late. "And of course Megan, our youngest," she added, her tone dropping instantly from glowing pride to mild, bored tolerance. "Always such a hard worker out in the dirty fields." That was it. That was absolutely all I got from the woman who gave birth to me. No proud mention of the multi-million-dollar business I built from nothing. No mention of 22 years of back-breaking, solitary labor in the freezing rain. No mention of the major corporate contracts, the prestigious organic soil certifications, or the undeniable fact that my beautiful produce was successfully sold in 3 different states. Just a hard worker out in the fields. The exact same dismissive sentence you would use to describe an old rented mule. I felt Matthew's large hand tighten painfully over mine. Family means we always stand together, my mother declared loudly, lifting her crystal wine glass high in the air. No matter what terrible hardships come our way. The entire room enthusiastically raised their glasses. Here, here, they chorused blindly. I lifted my simple water glass too. I forced a polite, empty smile. I took a slow sip, but Linda Bowman didn't lift her glass a single inch. She sat perfectly rigid, watching my mother on the stage with a terrifying expression I had only witnessed once before, 22 years ago. It was the exact face Linda made when she caught a local politician telling a blatant, damaging lie with absolute confidence. She looked directly at me. I looked straight back into her fierce eyes. We completely understood each other. Before anyone else could even speak, Jessica snatched the microphone back from our mother. She was practically vibrating with chaotic, nervous energy. While we're all here joyously celebrating my amazing parents, Jessica announced loudly, Tyler and I have a wonderful little surprise announcement of our very own. She dramatically paused. The entire room leaned in closer, hooked on her every word. We just put a massive deposit down on a gorgeous brand new house in the Willow Creek development. Loud, shocked gasps and thunderous applause erupted. Willow Creek was the absolute nicest, most exclusive gated development in the entire county. Massive stone facades, sprawling 3-car garages, the kind of wealthy place where every single manicured lawn looked exactly like a professional golf course. Buying into Willow Creek meant you had finally, truly arrived in high society. My mother clapped both her hands dramatically over her open mouth. Oh, Jessica! She rushed forward and pulled her oldest daughter into a massive theatrical hug. I am so incredibly proud of you, darling. I watched the sickening performance from my drafty table. Jessica absolutely did not have the kind of real money required for Willow Creek. Tyler barely managed a failing building supply store out on the highway. They had been struggling to lease their luxury SUV for 3 agonizing years. Just 4 short months ago, Jessica sobbed on my porch and told me she couldn't even cover Brittany's basic tuition without my immediate cash help. Now suddenly she's proudly buying a $1.7 million estate? Then Jessica deliberately turned to face me in front of the entire, completely silent room. I desperately wanted to stand up and scream at my little sister to stop, but I was frozen. She dramatically placed her manicured hand over her heart, her face twisting into a mask of pure condescending pity. Megan, she cooed into the microphone. I know things are incredibly, terribly hard for you right now with the bankruptcy, and I really want you to know something. When Tyler and I finally move into our new mansion, you and Matthew can rent out our old house. We'll give you a generous family discount. The entire room instantly melted into a puddle of absolute sympathy. Oh, people cooed, putting hands over their own hearts. I physically saw someone at the next table actually dab their eyes with a linen napkin at the sheer, overwhelming generosity of my saintly sister offering her ruined sibling a cheap roof. I sat perfectly still, my blood turning entirely to ice. This is exactly why she invited me. Not out of crushing guilt, not out of deep sisterly love. She desperately needed me sitting right here in this crowded room, playing the pathetic, bankrupt little sister, solely to make her grand, wealthy announcement shine infinitely brighter. I am nothing but the dark shadow that makes her falsely glow. I am the colossal failure she points at to firmly prove her own massive success. I smiled a dead, terrifying smile. I nodded slowly. Thank you so much, Jessica, I said aloud. The forced words tasted exactly like dry, bitter chalk on my tongue. Under the tablecloth, Matthew leaned incredibly close to my ear, his breath hot against my cold skin. Now you know, he whispered fiercely. Yes, I breathed back, my heart pounding a terrifying rhythm against my ribs. Now I finally know. But the emotional torture was only just beginning, and the absolute worst betrayal of the night was quietly sliding across my table right this second. Jessica was across the room in 4 angry strides. What? Why not? She hissed, her eyes darting nervously around the nearby tables. Because this is Mom and Dad's house, I replied, my voice rising just enough to carry over the clinking silverware. And I will absolutely not let anyone put their home at risk for a massive mortgage you cannot afford. Tyler leaned in quickly. It's just a standard formality, Megan. We already explained the process. You didn't explain anything, I shot back. You explicitly invited me to this dinner not to celebrate our parents, but because you desperately needed my ink on a legal loan document. The tables nearest to us suddenly went dead quiet. Heads began to turn. The cheerful background music seemed to instantly fade away. My mother aggressively pushed her way through the buffet line. Her perfect glowing smile was completely gone, replaced by a harsh, panicked glare. "Megan, please don't make a scene. Just help your sister out. She still thinks she can easily control me." I looked right into her eyes. "Mom, just last week you explicitly told me not to come tonight. You firmly said my depressing situation would completely ruin the party mood." I kept my tone terrifyingly steady. "Now I'm suddenly here because Jessica needs a binding signature. Which is it? Am I a beloved family member, or am I just a convenient tool?" The heavy words landed in the sudden silence like a massive stone dropped into completely still water. I could physically feel the shockwave move across the entire room. Chairs creaked loudly as bodies shifted. People exchanged quick, stunned glances, suddenly realizing this wasn't a sweet family toast. Jessica aggressively stepped forward. "You are always so incredibly selfish." My father finally stood up from his safe spot by the cake. His wooden chair violently scraped the hardwood floor. His face was tight with panic. "Megan," his voice cracked weakly. "Don't do this right now. Don't make your mother upset." I turned to face him. I looked deeply at this cowardly man who handed me the absolute worst land he owned and never once visited the thriving farm I built on it from nothing. "Every single time you say that to me, Dad, I lose a little more of my own soul." From table 4, Brenda Jefferson set her crystal wine glass down hard. She spoke loudly enough for the entire room to hear. "What on earth is going on over there?" That was the exact spark that blew the powder keg. Jessica's face went dark red, not an embarrassed flush. Furious, boiling red. The kind of raw anger that starts at the neck and violently climbs. "Do you have any idea what it's been like for me?" she screamed. Not at me. She yelled it to the entire crowded room. "My whole life, all I ever hear is Megan's farm this and Megan's organic that. Every time someone in this stupid town mentions her name, it's like I don't even exist." My mother frantically grabbed her arm. "Jessica, stop it." Jessica violently shook her off. "I'm the one with the real degree. I'm the one who went to a university. I'm the oldest child, and she just digs in the filthy dirt, and everyone treats her like she's some kind of amazing hero. There it is. The ugly jealousy she's hidden since we were little kids. She despises me." Tyler took a desperate step toward his wife. "Jess, that's enough." She completely ignored him. Her wild eyes locked directly onto mine, burning with years of toxic resentment. "You were only ever special because you had money, and now you don't have a single thing left. So what exactly are you now, Megan?" The silence that followed was absolute and suffocating. I could clearly hear the commercial refrigerator humming loudly in the distant kitchen. Someone at a back table nervously set down a metal fork, and it sounded exactly like a gunshot. Linda Bowman slowly rose from her chair. She didn't raise her voice. A legendary schoolteacher never needs to. "Jessica," Linda's voice cut clean through the heavy air. "You just told this entire room that your own sister only had value when she had cash." She paused, letting the brutal truth echo off the brick walls. "Did you even hear yourself?" Jessica's mouth fell open, but nothing came out. My mother stepped forward, her chin tipped high in fake defiance, and pointed a shaking finger directly at me. "This is your fault. You came in here specifically to humiliate us." She didn't say a single word, Pamela. Linda's voice struck like lightning. "Your daughter asked one simple question. Your other daughter loudly answered it." The room shifted again. 50 pairs of eyes darted from Linda, to my mother, to me. They were intensely watching a train wreck they couldn't look away from. I hadn't raised my voice once, and the ugly truth was already standing naked in the center of the room. "It's finally time." I stood up. My chair didn't scrape the floor. I pushed it back gently, the exact way you'd softly close a door you are never going to open again. "I'm not bankrupt," I said clearly. The entire room collectively held its breath. "I sold my farm to Summit Agribusiness exactly 4 weeks ago, for $12.8 million. My mother's face went instantly white, not pale, bone white, like all the blood had drained out of her head at once. The corporate contract was signed in David Winchester's legal office on a quiet Thursday morning. My husband asked me to tell you I'd lost absolutely everything. Not to play a cruel trick on you, but to see exactly what you would do when I had nothing." I reached into my leather purse and pulled out the crisp, folded sale receipt, the very one I'd been carrying like a heavy shield since that Thursday. I unfolded it slowly and laid it completely flat on the white tablecloth. Beside me, Matthew confirmed the massive number with a single, firm nod. In just 48 hours, here is exactly what happened, I announced. Mom, you immediately uninvited me from this anniversary dinner. You boldly claimed I'd ruin the party mood. I turned my gaze to my sister. Jessica, you instantly blocked my phone number. Then you magically unblocked it the second you realized you needed my signature for a bank loan. I looked at the broken man by the cake. Dad, you didn't say a single word in my defense. I picked up my phone, unlocked the screen, and held it up high so the tables nearest to me could clearly read the glowing words. And in the main family group chat, Mom, you proudly wrote this. Nobody lent her a dime. She did this to herself. Nora Fitzgerald's hand flew to cover her open mouth. Brenda Jefferson leaned so far forward in her chair she nearly fell out of it. Linda sat perfectly still, her hands neatly folded, watching the dominoes fall. My mother's voice came out as a strangled, desperate gasp. You lied to us. I didn't lie, I corrected softly. I said I lost absolutely everything, and within one single day, you proved that I was entirely right. I had lost everything, just not my money. The heavy iron chains are breaking. I can finally breathe. The room was so deeply quiet I could hear the tiny candle flames bending in the draft from the overhead air vent. Jessica sank heavily into the nearest empty chair, looking completely destroyed. Tyler was already aggressively heading for the front exit door, abandoning his frantic wife. There is just one more thing, I said. I didn't need to shout. Every single person in that restaurant was hanging on my every breath. I opened the saved email on my phone screen and turned it directly toward my father. 7 months ago, Dad, your close friend at the county assessor's office sent you a private message. Summit Agribusiness was quietly asking around about organic farmland in the area, specifically inquiring about my property. My father's jaw tightened. He refused to look at the glowing phone. He didn't need to read it. He knew exactly what damning evidence I was holding. You quickly forwarded it to Mom. No supportive note, no excited comment. You just passed the secret along. I slowly lowered the phone. You both knew that a massive corporation wanted to buy my farm for millions of dollars, and you never told me. But worse than that, Dad. Nora Fitzgerald turned slowly in her seat and glared directly at my mother. Brenda Jefferson did the exact same thing. I scrolled down to the second glowing screenshot and held it up again. You emailed the corporate buyers back behind my back. You illegally sent them my highly confidential farm records, and you boldly asked them for a 5% broker's fee. You actively tried to sell my life's agonizing work out from under me for a secret $640,000 commission. Why? I asked, a single tear finally escaping my eye. Because you knew if I sold the farm and had real independent wealth, I might finally stop blindly handing it over to you. I might finally see the toxic pattern. I might finally find the courage to say no. My father stood frozen with his rough hands hanging uselessly at his sides. He didn't try to deny the awful truth. He didn't offer a pathetic explanation. He just stood there, looking so incredibly small. A 69-year-old coward in a rented dining room, helplessly watching his entire fake family come apart at the seams. My mother recovered the absolute fastest. It was a vicious survival instinct. That's not true. We were simply protecting you from making a hasty, foolish business decision, Megan. That's exactly what loving parents do. From table 4, Linda Bowman's voice carried through the silent room. Calm, measured, utterly final. Pamela, every single person in this town knows you have been ruthlessly borrowing cash from Megan for 22 years. Do not stand up there and tell us this was protection. A low, heavy murmur ran rapidly through the entire dining room. It was the collective, undeniable sound of 50 people instantly rearranging everything they mistakenly thought they knew about the perfect Campbell family. Jessica stared blankly at the wooden floorboards. Tyler was completely gone. My father slowly sat back down without making a single sound. The empire of lies was finally reduced to ashes, but walking away from the smoldering wreckage was about to trigger an explosive, desperate reaction I never saw coming. I slowly folded the damning receipt and slid it safely back into my dark leather purse. I didn't dramatically slam it down. I didn't make a loud, aggressive gesture out of my victory. I simply tucked it away with the exact same casual motion I would use to put away a mundane grocery list. I don't need to scream. The absolute truth is loud enough on its own. I didn't come here tonight for cruel revenge, I stated softly, letting my calm voice carry over the frozen crowd. I came solely because Mom promised this fancy dinner was about celebrating our family. I foolishly wanted to believe her. My mother's bottom lip trembled violently, not with sudden guilt, with raw, defeated rage. I finally knew the clear difference between the two. But being a part of this specific family comes with a terrible condition I never officially agreed to, I continued, looking directly at my mother, then my sister, and finally, my silent father. I constantly have to be useful. I have to write the heavy checks. I have to completely swallow my feelings and keep my mouth shut when my hard-earned funds mysteriously disappear. And the exact second I have absolutely nothing left to give, I get uninvited to the table. I straightened my tired shoulders, taking a deep, cleansing breath. Starting tonight, I am not giving anyone in this toxic family another single dollar. Not because I'm burning with blind anger, because I finally, truly understand that I cannot ever buy a love that was never actually for sale. I turned gracefully to table 4. "Thank you, Linda," I whispered. "Thank you for always truly seeing me." Linda's sharp eyes glistened with unshed tears. She gave one firm, proud nod. Matthew stood up to his full height. He calmly buttoned his navy jacket and placed his warm, protective hand flat against the small of my back. We turned around and walked slowly toward the front door together. The crowded dining room was so deeply, unnervingly quiet that I could literally hear my own steady footsteps echoing loudly on the polished hardwood floor. Tap, tap, tap. It was a distinct sound that used to terrify me to my very core, the lonely sound of leaving, of being the bad guy who selfishly walks away. It didn't terrify me anymore. It sounded exactly like pure freedom. Nobody dared to call my name. Nobody chased after us into the night. Outside, the empty parking lot was incredibly cold and pitch dark. The warm, yellow restaurant light spilled weakly through the large glass windows, painting bright rectangles across the cracked asphalt. Matthew gently opened the heavy passenger door for me, and I slid into the quiet cabin. He climbed into the driver's seat and started the rumbling engine. He paused, looking over at my shadowed face. "Are you okay?" I leaned my heavy head back against the soft leather headrest and closed my eyes. The suffocating, painful tension that had been tightly coiled in the center of my chest for 22 long years, maybe even longer, suddenly loosened one massive notch. For the absolute first time in 22 years, I breathed out, "Yes, I am." Exactly 72 hours after the explosive anniversary dinner, my silent cell phone lit up like a frantic emergency switchboard. My mother aggressively texted first, "Sweetheart, I am so deeply sorry. I reacted terribly. I was just in complete shock. Please, can we sit down and talk this out?" Jessica followed exactly 8 hours later. "I know I was entirely wrong, Megan. I've just been under so much extreme pressure lately. Let's get a quiet lunch, just the two of us sisters." Then came my father. He sent the longest digital message he had ever typed in his entire life. 3 massive, rambling paragraphs. He deliberately used the word sorry 4 different times. He used the word proud twice. He had literally never spoken either of those words to me before. I read every single frantic message while sitting peacefully at my sunny kitchen table, letting my morning coffee grow cold. Matthew sat directly across from me, quietly working through a mundane medical invoice. He didn't even bother to look up. He already knew exactly what the desperate messages said. He confidently knew they were coming. "When they thought you had absolutely nothing," Matthew said quietly, his pen scratching against the paper, "they completely disappeared from your life in 48 hours. Now that they firmly know you possess $12.5 million, they magically came crawling back in 72. He set his pen down, his eyes meeting mine. "Same exact people, same exact speed. just a totally different direction. He's right. They aren't reaching out to a daughter. They are desperately trying to hack into a locked ATM. I scrolled mindlessly through the glowing apologies one last time. They were so incredibly polished. The wording was highly careful and deeply calculated. Every single fake sentence was expertly designed to crack a closed door back open. Not because they were genuinely sorry for breaking my heart, but because my massive bank account was still sitting right on the other side of it. I didn't reply to a single one of them. Instead, I calmly opened the main family group chat and typed one final, undeniable message. I need permanent time. Please do not ever contact me again. I hit send. I permanently muted the toxic chat. Then, I set the plastic device face down on the wooden table and just sat perfectly still in the quiet room. It was the absolute first silence in my entire life that didn't have a hidden, rusty knife waiting inside it. Matthew looked up, his brow furrowing slightly. What do you need right now? Nothing. I smiled softly. I think that is the entire point. Walking proudly out of that restaurant, I finally felt something I had been starving for. My own 2 feet planted firmly on solid, unbreakable ground. If you are listening to my voice right now, I think you know exactly what that heavy exhaustion feels like. Some of you are secretly living this exact nightmare right this very second. I desperately want you to hear this truth, letting it sink deep into your bones. Setting a strict boundary is never a cruel betrayal. It is absolute, basic survival. If you have ever been the blind ATM of your own family, you are not crazy. You are just being used. The fallout in town was swift and completely merciless. Without my required signature, the shady collateral deal entirely fell through. Peak Valley Bank officially rejected Jessica and Tyler's massive mortgage application within a single week. The exclusive Willow Creek housing deposit, $50,000 secretly borrowed against a desperate line of credit they absolutely couldn't afford, was instantly gone. Non-refundable. The luxury development sales office sent a very polite, sterile letter of termination. The gorgeous mansion went right back on the open market. Someone else would get the beautiful stone facade and the sprawling 3-car garage. But that wasn't even the worst of it. Tyler eventually found the hidden credit card statement buried in a drawer 3 agonizing days later. Jessica had secretly taken a massive cash advance, $30,000, just to dangerously cover her half of the failed deposit. She hadn't breathed a single word of it to her husband. She'd foolishly hidden the ballooning balance behind an automatic minimum payment, praying the risky mortgage would quickly close before he ever noticed the missing funds. I heard about the explosive, screaming fight from Linda, who easily heard it from Nora, who directly heard it from Brenda, who lived right next door to Tyler's older brother. In Mapleton, juicy information travels through the exact same natural channels as rainwater, aggressively downhill, and absolutely everywhere. Tyler immediately packed his bags and moved into the lonely guest room. Their marriage was fracturing under the immense weight of her chronic lies. Because the tuition money was suddenly gone, Jessica was forced to abruptly pull Brittany out of her elite private school, Crestview Prep. My brilliant niece started classes at Mapleton Public High the very next Monday, completely shell-shocked and painfully quiet. My chest physically ached for that sweet girl. Brittany didn't do a single thing wrong. She was just innocent collateral damage in her mother's greedy, toxic war. I didn't want to hurt her, but I couldn't keep setting myself on fire just to keep my sister warm. The dust was finally settling, and I thought the absolute worst was completely over. But my mother was a terrifying woman who never accepted defeat, and her final, desperate, sickening move was going to happen in the dead of night. The explosive anniversary dinner quickly became the absolute only thing people in our small town talked about, not in a malicious, gossipy way. Mapleton isn't a cruel place, just a brutally honest one. People talked the specific way neighbors do when they suddenly realize the perfect family they deeply admired was actually a hollow facade, held together entirely with borrowed money and forced silence. My mother, Pamela, got physically approached at church by Hannah Wallace, the head deacon's wife. Hannah looked her right in the eye and asked plainly, Is it actually true you told people not to help Megan when she lost everything? My mother couldn't even form an answer. She just snatched up her expensive leather purse and practically ran out of the Sunday service early. For the absolute first time in 45 years, nobody at Grace Fellowship bothered to save her a seat in the pews. Exactly 1 week after the disastrous dinner, I heard a slow, heavy knock at my front door. It was my father. He was completely alone. There was no car parked in my driveway. I realized with a shock that he had actually walked the entire 4 miles from town in the freezing October wind. He stood shivering on my porch in his old canvas jacket, twisting the cap he normally wore to the hardware store nervously in his raw hands. He suddenly looked 10 years older than he did at the restaurant. "I'm not here for your money," he rasped, his breath pluming in the cold air. "Okay," I said softly. "I'm here because I owe you something, not cash. Just words." I stepped back and opened the door wider. He walked inside. Matthew was standing in the kitchen. He quietly poured a steaming cup of dark coffee for my father, set it gently on the wooden table, and walked right out the back door without saying a single word. He closed it firmly behind him, giving us the room. My father wrapped both of his trembling hands tightly around the warm ceramic mug like he was freezing to death. He stared down at the dark surface of the coffee for a very long time. "I intimately knew what your mother was doing to you," he finally confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. "I knew Jessica was doing it too. I cowardly watched them call you, watched them fake cry, watched you obediently send the money every single time. He knew. The whole time, he knew. And you never tried to stop them." "No." His voice cracked, a pathetic, broken sound. "I was terrified of your mother. I was afraid of the loud fighting, of everything falling apart." "It fell apart a very long time ago, Dad," I replied, my voice completely steady. "You just didn't want to open your eyes and look at it." He nodded slowly. He wiped his watery eyes with the rough back of his hand, a quick, embarrassed gesture like he was swatting away a fly. "I gave you that bad, dead land on purpose 22 years ago," he admitted. "Not because I didn't love you, but because I honestly thought you were the only one strong enough to make something incredible from absolute nothing. And you actually did. And I was too much of a coward to protect what you built." He looked down at the floorboards. "I was a weak coward then, and I was horribly greedy when I saw the Summit corporate paperwork." I sat across from him, feeling nothing but a deep, profound pity. "I do love you, Dad, but I cannot ever go back to being the invisible person everyone only remembers when they desperately need something." He nodded again. "I completely understand." He quickly finished his coffee, set the empty mug carefully in the stainless sink, and walked back out into the freezing cold. The following Tuesday, Matthew and I sat in the quiet, leather-scented office of Cynthia Owens. She was a ruthless trust and estate attorney exactly 2 counties over. She had silver hair, sharp reading glasses on a silver chain, and a no-nonsense manner that heavily reminded me of Linda. We legally established an ironclad, irrevocable trust. The entire $12.5 million went straight in. Matthew and I were listed as the sole trustees and beneficiaries. No one else had legal access. No one else could ever petition for a single dime. The legal structure was incredibly clean and permanent. It felt exactly like a heavy steel door that locks exclusively from the inside. Cynthia quickly sent formal, typed letters on our behalf, printed on intimidating legal letterhead, directly to my mother, my father, and Jessica. The language was chillingly simple. All future financial requests will not be considered or answered. This is not a punitive measure. It is a strict legal boundary. My mother frantically called Cynthia's office the exact same day the thick letter arrived. Cynthia's stern paralegal smoothly declined to provide any extra information. My mother desperately tried twice more. She was sugary polite the first time, highly aggressive the second. The third time, the paralegal simply stated, "Mrs. Campbell, there is absolutely nothing more I can share with you," and hung up the phone. Jessica sent me a massive text message later that same night. It was 4 rambling paragraphs long. It violently shifted between fake apology and harsh accusation like a drunk driver swerving between lanes. "I am so sorry," sat right next to, "You have completely destroyed this family." "I know I was wrong," was closely followed by, "But you have to deeply understand my side." It ended with the ultimate guilt trip. "I sincerely hope you can live with what you have cruelly done." I read it exactly once. I set the glowing phone down. I didn't type a single letter back. Matthew found me sitting out on the dark porch, tightly wrapped in a wool blanket, watching the last purple light drain completely from the evening sky. "Jessica blindly says I destroyed the family," I told him, resting my head on his strong shoulder. He sat down closely beside me. "You didn't destroy a single thing, Megan. You just finally stopped rebuilding what they kept intentionally breaking." The wide sky turned pitch black. The bright silver stars came out one by one. We sat there together until the biting cold drove us back inside. And for the absolute first time in weeks, I slept deeply through the entire night. I truly thought the war was permanently over. I thought the heavy silence meant I had finally won. But my mother was a woman who never accepted defeat, and she was about to play the most sickening, twisted card of her entire life. 4 weeks after the dinner, my phone violently buzzed on the nightstand. It was a text message, 10:35 p.m. "Megan, I have been having severe chest pains. I might have to rush to the hospital. I just thought you should know." I stared in absolute horror at the bright screen in the dark bedroom. Matthew was deeply asleep beside me. The harsh blue light of the phone turned the white ceiling into a shallow, glowing pool. My heart rate spiked dangerously. One sharp, terrifying animal moment of pure panic washed over me. I was suddenly 24 years old again, standing alone in a freezing metal trailer, and my mother's voice was the only comfort I had in the world. I desperately wanted to call her. I wanted to drive 100 miles an hour. I wanted to be the perfect, good daughter, the one who drops absolutely everything, the one who never, ever says no. I grabbed my cold car keys. I drove like an absolute maniac to Mapleton County Hospital at 11 o'clock at night, my chest hammering so hard I thought my ribs would crack. I sprinted frantically through the automatic sliding glass doors and breathlessly begged the desk nurse for her room number. The nurse casually pointed down the quiet, sterile hallway. I burst into room 214, completely out of breath, absolutely terrified I was about to watch my mother die. She was sitting straight up in the hospital bed, looking perfectly healthy, calmly watching a late-night television show. And sitting right there on her lap, clearly illuminated by the harsh, buzzing fluorescent lights overhead, were the thick Peak Valley Bank collateral documents. "Oh good, you finally made it," she said smoothly. There was not a single hint of pain in her steady voice. "Jessica said the bank graciously extended the loan deadline if we can get your physical signatures tonight. Just sign it right now, Megan. Please, do it for my high blood pressure." I stopped dead in my tracks. This was her final move, the fake health scare, the ultimate, toxic guilt trip that completely bypasses all logic and goes straight for the emotional throat. It was the absolute weapon of last resort for a manipulative woman who spent 68 years brilliantly learning exactly which strings to pull to make her puppets dance. I didn't scream at her. I didn't bother to argue. I just stared at the woman who gave birth to me, who literally used a fake, terrifying heart attack as a hostage negotiation strategy for real estate. I slowly pulled out my phone. I typed back to her message from earlier. "Mom, if you are truly sick, I will always help pay for direct medical care. But I will absolutely never hand you cash, and I will always verify with a doctor first." I turned right around. I walked straight out of the cold hospital room without speaking a single syllable. I left her desperately screaming my name down the empty, sterile hallway. The toxic trap only works when you don't see the hidden teeth. I drove slowly back home, set my phone quietly on the wooden nightstand, and lay back down in my warm bed. My hands didn't shake. My chest didn't ache. I just felt incredibly tired, deeply, thoroughly exhausted. But it was a completely different kind of tired. It was the peaceful tiredness of someone who is permanently finished fighting, not someone who has hopelessly given up. I closed my eyes. I slept perfectly. A few days later, a small pale blue envelope arrived in the mail. It was hand-addressed in the careful, rounded cursive of a 15-year-old girl. There was no return address, but I instantly recognized the thick stationery. It was the exact kind Brittany picked out last autumn when I happily took her back to school shopping. I carefully opened it at the kitchen table. "Dear Aunt Megan, I really don't understand everything that happened between you and Mom. Nobody tells me the actual full story. And I think that's mostly because they don't want me to pick sides. I'm absolutely not picking sides. I just wanted you to know that I really miss you. You always made me feel like I was actually smart enough to do huge things in the world. Mom doesn't really say nice stuff like that. You do. I'm so sorry for whatever Mom did to you. I know she's not always a nice person. Love, Brittany." I read the sweet letter 3 times. Then I folded it incredibly carefully, pressed it flat against my aching chest, and I finally cried. Not the helpless, wrung-out, painful sobbing I had done so many times this past month. This was the rare kind of crying that deeply cleans your soul, the kind that only comes when someone innocent sees you clearly, without a hidden agenda, without cruel calculation, and bravely says so in their own handwriting. I wrote her back that very afternoon. "Dear Brittany, I love you so much. I will absolutely always be here for you. But I just need some time away from your mom right now, and that is entirely between her and me. None of this mess is your fault. Do not ever let anyone tell you it is." Then I picked up the phone and called Cynthia Owens. I formally asked her to set up a highly restricted education fund, $60,000 securely held in trust, legally accessible only for direct college tuition and valid school expenses. Jessica's greedy name was absolutely nowhere on the legal document. Brittany could freely use it when the proper time finally came. Matthew quietly reviewed the thick paperwork that evening. He signed his portion without a single second of hesitation. "She's a really good kid," he murmured. "She's the absolute best of all of them." He nodded firmly. That was the absolute last word either of us ever said about it. Exactly 8 months later, Matthew and I happily closed on 250 beautiful acres in Pine County, exactly 40 miles south of Mapleton. The new land wasn't quite as flat or as rich as what I had before, but it was solid, honest land. Dark clay loam resting over deep limestone, with a gorgeous, spring-fed creek running brightly along the entire western edge. It was the exact kind of land that heavily rewards patient, loving hands. We built a much smaller operation this time around. No massive corporate contracts with regional supermarket chains, no stressful packing facility. Just 50 quiet acres of mixed vegetables, a small, thriving apple orchard, a cheerful wooden roadside stand, and exactly enough squawking chickens to keep Linda happily supplied in fresh eggs. Linda still drives out to see us every single Saturday with a fresh pie. She sits comfortably on our wide new porch, the one Matthew built entirely by himself with salvaged lumber from an old fallen barn, and we drink cold iced tea and talk about absolutely nothing important. Sometimes she brings her sweet friend Rachel, who teaches local quilting at the community center. Sometimes she comes entirely alone, and we just sit in perfect silence, peacefully watching the gentle wind move through the young green apple trees. I also bravely joined a private support group in the next town over. It was a room full of brave women who intimately understand what it means to be the family ATM. We quietly meet every other Tuesday evening in the damp basement of a local Methodist church. Nobody uses their real last names. The cheap coffee is absolutely terrible. It is the absolute safest room I have ever been in. Jessica hasn't contacted me a single time. Pamela sends a generic message on Mother's Day and Thanksgiving. It is always the exact same fake tone, always a thin, rusty blade wrapped tightly in a Bible scripture. "Praying for your lost soul daily, sweetheart." I never respond. My father sends a simple Christmas card. It is handwritten, exactly 3 sentences long. "Merry Christmas, Megan. I think about you. Love, Dad." No urgent request for cash, no heavy guilt trip, just the simple words. I keep his card. I put it right next to Brenda Jefferson's supportive note on the silver fridge. The boundary holds strong. The deep quiet stays. I used to foolishly think quiet meant something important was missing. Now I finally understand the truth. It is simply the beautiful sound of a life that completely belongs to me. I want to say something directly to you right now, if that's all right. For 16 agonizing years, I truly believed I was the broken problem. I believed I didn't give enough cash, didn't try hard enough, didn't love my family the right way. Every single time my mother cried her fake tears on the phone, I honestly thought it was my fault. Every time Jessica made a cutting, jealous remark about my lack of education, or my dirty job, or my simple life. I completely absorbed the poison. I told myself that's just what family does. They violently push your buttons simply because they love you. Matthew saw it entirely differently. He clearly saw a tired woman who worked 70-hour weeks in the blistering heat and the freezing cold to build something incredibly real, and then blindly handed massive pieces of it away to greedy people who never once asked how she was actually doing. He didn't say the harsh truth to hurt my feelings. He said it because he loved me enough to tell the absolute truth when nobody else in the world would. I am absolutely not telling you this painful story so you will feel sorry for me. I don't need pity. I am telling you this because I know for a fact some of you are sitting right where I sat at that kitchen table. You are looking at a phone full of demanding messages from toxic people who only ever reach out when they desperately need something, and you are wondering if you're going crazy for feeling horribly used. You are not crazy. You are not selfish. You are absolutely not ungrateful. Setting a firm boundary does not mean you suddenly stopped loving someone. It means you finally started loving yourself. If your own blood family treats you exactly like a bank account with a beating heartbeat, that is absolutely not your failure. That is their disgusting choice. And you are legally, morally allowed. You are fully entitled to firmly choose differently. I finally chose differently. It permanently cost me my mother's fake approval, my jealous sister's toxic presence, and a weak version of my father I will never get back. But it gave me my entire life. I would make the exact same brutal choice again tomorrow. It is early morning on the new farm. A thick, cool fog sits low in the blooming orchard, curling beautifully around the thick bases of the apple trees like something out of a master painting. It's a painting I would never actually hang on my wall because it would look entirely too perfect to be real. I am standing peacefully by the chicken coop with a warm mug of coffee, watching the silly hens angrily argue over a bright patch of green clover. The crisp air smells exactly like wet grass and freshly turned earth. Matthew rebuilt the coop from salvaged, weather-beaten wood. It leans slightly to the left, and we warmly joke that it simply has character. The rusty screen door creaks loudly behind me. Matthew walks slowly across the dewy yard in his thick socks, carrying his own steaming mug. He stands closely beside me. We don't talk. We absolutely don't need to. My phone buzzes softly in my back pocket. I pull it out. A text message from Brittany. Aunt Megan, I got accepted into the advanced STEM program. Full ride scholarship. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I smile. A massive, genuine, real smile. The kind of smile that starts deep in the center of your chest and spreads warmly outward until your cheeks hurt. I turn the glowing phone toward Matthew. He reads it silently, gives a proud nod, and smiles too. I look out at the beautiful quiet field. 250 acres, much smaller than what I proudly had before. No massive distribution contracts, no giant corporate summit partnership, no fancy name printed in the regional farm journal. Just good, honest land, incredibly well tended, with a bright creek that doesn't owe anyone a single drop of water. Every single inch of this acre is mine. Not because my cowardly father handed it to me as a joke, and not because someone else arrogantly decided I finally deserved it, because I bravely chose it. Because I bled and earned it. Because I finally walked away from the toxic people who desperately wanted to take it, and I proudly walked toward the peaceful life I wanted to keep. My name is Megan Harrison. I am 45 years old, and for the absolute first time in my entire life, I do not owe anyone a single thing. Not my money, not my guilt, not even an explanation. The morning fog slowly lifts, the bright sun breaks warmly through the clouds, and the arguing chickens finally settle down. It is a really good morning. That is my story. And if it felt exactly like yours, even a little bit, I am so incredibly glad you stayed with me until the very end. Drop a comment below and tell me, what boundary have you bravely set in your life, or what boundary do you desperately wish you could set today? I read every single one. And if you want more stories exactly like this, real, raw ones about strong women finally choosing themselves, check the description box below. There are 2 more videos I know you will absolutely love. Subscribe if you haven't already. And please always remember, you are absolutely not an ATM. You are a human being. You are someone's equal. Always.